When you picture a healthcare crisis on the evening news, uh, what do you see? It's probably chaotic emergency rooms, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Flashing neon lights, stretchers lining the hallways, exhausted doctors running around in scrubs.
Yeah, it's that very visceral, immediate image. I mean, it's the visual shorthand we all use for a medical system under pressure. It just instantly communicates urgency.
Right. But what if, and this is wild, what if that exact mental image is essentially an optical illusion?
A really damaging one. Yeah.
Exactly. One that is actively hurting how we understand medicine.
Welcome to the deep dive.
Today, our mission is to explore this really fascinating and, frankly, highly critical argument from France.
Right, it's based on a text by Dr. Christophe Delong.
Yeah, titled La médecine a perdu sa parole, which translates to Medicine has lost its voice. And DeLong makes this really bold claim.
He does. He basically argues that a tiny, highly visible minority of doctors has completely hijacked the public narrative.
And the media narrative, too.
Exactly. And by doing that, they've pushed the true backbone of the medical system completely into the shadows.
Now, before we get into the weeds here, I do want to clarify something for you listening. This touches on some incredibly heated debates, about healthcare systems, funding, labor politics.
Oh, definitely a minefield.
Yeah. And we are not here to take political sides. We're not going to tell you who is right or wrong in the broader healthcare debate.
No, we're simply here to act as your guides, really. Just unpacking the mechanics of the arguments presented in DeLong's text.
Right. Our goal is to synthesize this perspective because it offers this totally inverted view of the medical hierarchy you might be used to.
It really asks us to look past the flashing sirens and ask, well, who is actually doing the foundational work of healing?
Okay, let's unpack this, because the text starts by just completely dismantling our assumptions about the people actually running those chaotic emergency rooms.
Yeah, the so-called urgentists.
Right. I think most of us have this idea of the specialized ER doctor as this, uniform, highly trained elite unit, almost like the medical Navy SEALs.
They drop in, stabilize the patient, save the day.
Exactly. But DeLong reveals this uniform identity is largely a myth.
It is. I mean, the public assumption is that ER doctor is this monolithic specialty, like something you go to medical school for and train exclusively in from day one.
But that's not the case.
Not at all. In France, the specific emergency medicine diploma, they call it the DES, it was actually only created in 2017.
Wait, really? 2017.
Yeah.
Let that sink in. That is incredibly recent for a major medical discipline.
It fundamentally changes how you view the whole department.
Yeah.
Because that diploma is so new, only about 10 to 15% of current ER staff actually hold that specific qualification.
That leaves a massive gap.
A huge gap. The remaining 85 to 90% of the people working in those emergency departments form what DeLong describes as a heterogeneous patchwork.
Right, a patchwork of totally different statuses and backgrounds. And he breaks this patchwork down into 4 groups, which I think is so fascinating.
What's fascinating here is how it explains why the system acts the way it does.
Exactly. So first you have what he calls the ancients, right? The elders.
Yeah, these are essentially aging general practitioners who maybe took some extra training decades ago.
They come from that classic culture of family medicine, looking at the whole patient, thinking about long-term care.
But they are currently being pushed out by new hospital reforms that just prioritize sheer speed and turnover.
Right, which causes this huge cultural clash right at the front door of the hospital.
Yeah.
Then you have the second group, the DESC.
These are the doctors caught in that weird transition period before the 2017 diploma existed.
They have a double culture, right?
Yeah, they might be trained in anesthesia or maybe internal medicine, but they also work the ER. So their foundation isn't purely emergency triage.
It's a hybrid. And then the third group, this is where the mechanics of hospital labor get really intense. DeLong calls it a massive taboo.
Oh, the media absolutely refuses to talk about this. The PADHUE.
It's foreign-trained doctors.
Exactly. And their role is just staggering when you look at the raw numbers. I mean, they make up 30 to 60% of the shifts in peripheral regional hospitals.
Wow. Up to 60%?
Yeah. We are talking about highly competent professionals who are basically keeping the entire rural system afloat.
But there is a huge catch, right? Because their foreign credentials aren't fully recognized in the same way, they are kept in these totally precarious employment situations.
Very precarious. They do all the heavy lifting of emergency medicine, often taking the absolute worst night shifts.
But they aren't the ones you see giving those polished, heroic interviews on the evening news.
Never. They are systemically trapped in this lower-tier status, basically serving as cheap labor to patch the holes in the schedule.
Which brings us to the final piece of the 85 to 90% patchwork, the intérimaires.
The temp doctors.
Yeah, the mercenaries of the medical field. They parachute in, they get highly paid to fill empty shifts, but the trade-off is zero continuity.
Right. They have no long-term investment in that specific hospital.
They don't know the local protocols, they don't know the nurses, and they don't know the patients. They just process the immediate symptom and leave.
It's just transactional.
Totally transactional. So looking at all of this, if 85 to 90% of the ER is this precarious, fragmented patchwork of, aging GPs, foreign doctors in limbo, and highly paid temps,
Yeah.
how on earth did this specific department convince the entire country that they are the undisputed owners of the hospital?
Well, it comes down to what Delong defines as the paradox of power.
Okay, break that down.
Society has basically granted absolute political and media power to a physical location,
Huh.
the literal emergency room itself, rather than to a homogeneous medical competence.
Oh, I love the analogy he uses for this. The porter turned owner.
It's a great metaphor.
Right. Imagine a grand, complex estate.
Yeah.
The person who holds the front door, the porter, controls who enters and who gets turned away. And because they control that flow, they can easily convince the public standing outside that they own the entire house, that they understand all its secrets.
Meanwhile, the true owners of the deep medical knowledge, the specialized surgeons, the neurologists, the endocrinologists, they are upstairs.
In deafening silence, as DeLong says.
Right. They are in the operating rooms doing the intricate long-term work, but they do not control the lobby.
They are totally invisibilized by the sheer noise of the front entrance. But if the ER is just the front door, it really begs the question, why does the media treat it like it's the entire house?
The underlying mechanism here is a deceptive metonymy.
A metonymy, right, where a part of something represents the whole.
Think of how we say Wall Street when we really mean the entire global financial industry.
Right, right.
In healthcare, the public and the media have completely internalized this idea that the hospital equals the emergencies.
And modern media is entirely to blame for supercharging this. The text calls it the dictatorship of the visual.
Which makes perfect sense if you think about television news mechanics.
Exactly. A stretcher sitting in a crowded hallway under those harsh fluorescent lights, that is an inherently dramatic, telegenic image.
It communicates a crisis instantly. No voiceover needed.
It guarantees ratings because it is pure visual panic. Contrast that visual with the reality of a specialist's work, like a diabetologist.
Oh, the contrast is night and day.
This is a doctor who might spend 6 agonizing months carefully balancing a really complex patient's health, analyzing data, adjusting microdoses of insulin.
Looking at genetic markers, diet, stress levels, that work is profound.
Yeah.
It requires what DeLong calls vertical training.
Vertical train.
Yeah, a really deep, highly nuanced understanding of disease history.
But an expert staring at a spreadsheet and tweaking an insulin dose, that makes for terrible television.
It's so boring to watch. It's cerebral. It's slow. You can't put a breaking news banner over a doctor thoughtfully reviewing a chart.
Nuance and incremental progress just do not survive on TV. Panic does.
And this dictatorship of the visual leads to this deeply concerning shift in hospital power dynamics. It creates the silent humiliation of the medical specialists.
Because the ER controls the visual narrative of the crisis, right? They have the stretchers on camera.
So they also end up commanding the resources, the funding, the logistics.
It is a total inversion of the traditional medical hierarchy. These brilliant vertical specialists who spent 20 years mastering the human heart,
Yeah.
they now find themselves having to literally beg ER logistics managers for permission to hospitalize their own patients.
Medical expertise is forced to bow down and ask permission from an administrative spreadsheet. It's crazy.
And the language they use reflects this perfectly, the semantic humiliation. ER bosses actually refer to these specialized departments simply as downstream beds.
Downstream beds, lit séval.
They strip away all the medical prestige. They reduce these highly trained colleagues to mere physical storage units, just a place to dump the overflow so the ER can clear its waiting room.
Exactly. Keep the front door moving at all costs.
But hold on, let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Sure.
Because a stretcher parked in a hallway is a sign of a genuinely broken system, right? Patients shouldn't be receiving care in a corridor.
No, absolutely not.
So why is this framed as the ER bosses using saturation as a platform? Isn't the ER just sounding a totally valid alarm?
Well, the reality of the stretchers isn't being denied. The people in those hallways are really suffering. What DeLong is criticizing is the monopolization of the crisis.
Oh, I see.
The argument is that the ER leadership uses this highly visible saturation to dictate that the health of the entire hospital system must be measured only by the number of stretchers in their specific hallway.
So they're saying our bottleneck is the only bottleneck that matters.
Precisely. At that exact same moment, the surgery department, or psychiatry or geriatrics, they could literally be on fire with their own massive crises.
So shortages, outdated equipment.
Right. But because a psychiatric crisis doesn't happen at 8 p.m. under a news camera in the ER lobby, society acts as if it isn't happening.
Wow. If it isn't visible at the front door, it doesn't exist. That is a terrifying blind spot.
It really is.
So if the ER is taking all the credit, monopolizing the airtime, who's actually doing the heavy lifting to keep the population healthy before they ever reach the hospital?
That brings us to what the text calls the Great Forgotten. In the French system, these are the libéraux,
The private practice, general practitioners, and the community specialists.
the true shield of the healthcare system. And the argument relies on this beautiful concept, companionship medicine.
Companionship medicine. Let's break down what that actually looks like in practice, because this isn't just treating a symptom.
No, this is managing a patient's entire social and medical complexity over decades. A GP knows you have hypertension, sure, but they also know you just went through a divorce.
Or you lost your job.
Or that your grandfather had the exact same heart condition. They are managing chronic illness, adjusting preventive care, tracking subtle changes over time.
Building a comprehensive health profile.
Yeah.
Whereas the ER, by contrast, is structurally designed for one-shot medicine.
Right, it's anonymous.
Yeah.
You arrive, they stabilize your vital functions, and they discharge you.
Which is a necessary safety net, obviously.
Absolutely. But it is fundamentally limited to the short-term management of vital flows. It is not the long-term construction of health.
Yet the media caricature of these two groups could not be more lopsided.
It's absurd.
The ER doctor is universally painted as the selfless, exhausted hero, saving lives under the neon lights.
Battling the odds.
Right. Meanwhile, the private practice GP is implicitly caricatured as this, privileged, greedy business person, working comfortable hours, playing golf, only dealing with minor sniffles.
It's a deeply unfair dichotomy. It totally ignores the preventative work that keeps the ERs from collapsing entirely.
And to understand just how skewed this narrative is, we have to look at the math. The killer numbers, as DeLong calls them.
These numbers really put the power imbalance into perspective.
Let me make sure I have these right, because they are jarring. Out of all the practicing doctors in France, there are roughly 4,500 urgentists, ER doctors.
Or 8,500, yes.
And the total number of doctors across all fields is over 237,000.
That means ER doctors make up less than 2% of the medical profession.
Less than 2%. But that 2% monopolizes 80% of the media discourse.
It's wild. They are constantly handed the microphone to speak on behalf of the other 98% who are working quietly upstairs.
And just to really drive it home, there are roughly 100,000 general practitioners. That is 22 times more GPs than ER doctors.
Yet those 100,000 doctors get maybe 10 to 15% of the airtime.
The disparity is massive, and it completely warps public perception of what medicine actually is.
There is an incredibly powerful metaphor used to describe this dynamic. Imagine a house.
Okay.
The media hands a megaphone to the guy screaming fire in the living room while completely turning their backs on the people who spent the last 20 years meticulously fireproofing the walls.
Installing the sprinklers, checking the wiring.
Exactly. And even worse, the narrative subtly accuses the fireproofers of being lazy or somehow responsible for the fire.
Think about the systemic danger of that illusion. By only listening to the people screaming fire, you create a public policy environment where medicine is viewed exclusively as triage.
Funding and political energy get diverted entirely toward dealing with immediate, spectacular trauma.
You lose sight of the fact that real, sustainable health care is mostly about the slow, invisible, daily work of keeping people from catching fire in the first place.
Which naturally leads us to the most frustrating, paradoxical problem of all. What happens when the invisible fireproofers try to sound the alarm?
Right. What happens when the GPs try to protest their working conditions?
They fall right into the trap of the visual dictatorship. It creates the strike paradox.
Let's walk through the mechanics of this because it's both brilliant and tragic. When the ER goes on strike, what does it look like?
The media shows up and gets incredible footage.
Right. Nurses running, stretchers stacked up, crowded hallways. The public feels immediate, visceral empathy. The drama is palpable.
And politicians are forced to react to the visual of a collapsing hospital. Now, Contrast that with a strike by the invisible infantry.
When 100,000 GPs go on strike, what exactly are the news cameras supposed to film?
A closed door.
An empty waiting room, an answering machine telling you to call back on Monday.
You cannot film a void.
No. And because there is no dramatic visual of suffering, the public fundamentally misinterprets the action. They don't see a critical pillar of healthcare collapsing.
They just think, oh, my doctor is on vacation again.
Exactly. They view it as a personal inconvenience, not a systemic crisis.
But the mechanics of the strike don't end there. The real damage happens through something called the vessel effect.
The communicating vessels. Think of a system of connected pipes. When 100,000 GPs lock their doors, the baseline medical needs of the population don't just magically disappear.
No. The child with the fever, the guy with sudden chest pain, they all have to go somewhere.
So they inevitably spill over into the only door left open, the emergency room. The emergency hotline just explodes.
And the ERs become completely saturated with patients who would normally be handled by their family doctors.
And where do the media cameras go?
Straight back to the ER.
They rush to the saturated ER. The reporters look at the absolute chaos at the front door and conclude, look at this disaster. The ER is suffering so much, we must give more money and more power to the ER.
It is the ultimate trap. The strike by the GPs actually ends up serving the political arguments of the ER doctors.
It proves by sheer absurdity that the hospital is the only functional last resort. It reinforces the exact myth the GPs were striking to dismantle.
They literally cannot win the PR battle. And there's another layer to this trap that makes it nearly impossible for GPs to prove their worth during a protest: the time delay.
Right, the time delay of consequences. If an ER stops functioning for 1 single hour, the risk to human life is immediate. It's highly visible.
A trauma patient could die right there on camera. The causality is undeniable.
But if a GP goes on strike, or simply quits the profession entirely, nobody dies that same afternoon. The consequences are completely silent.
And severely delayed. It's the decompensated diabetes that spirals out of control over months.
Or the creeping, unmonitored hypertension that eventually leads to a stroke.
Or the early-stage cancer that goes undiagnosed because they couldn't get a routine screening.
Those consequences won't show up in the national mortality statistics for 6 months, a year, maybe 2 years.
And by the time those patients finally crash and end up in the ER, the public never connects the two events.
The narrative never traces that stroke back to the closed GP clinic a year prior. The time delay completely obscures the vital importance of preventative work.
So we have this system where the 2% control the narrative, the 98% are invisibilized, and the very act of protesting just strengthens the illusion.
It's a brutal mathematical reality. If the private practice doctors, the invisible infantry, stop working for just 1 day, the ER collapses in 2 hours.
Exactly.
That is how crucial they are. The ER isn't holding the system up. The GPs are holding the ER up.
It's a profound shift in perspective. It forces you to completely reevaluate who the actual heroes of a healthcare system are.
There is a really beautiful, unifying analogy presented at the end of this argument. It suggests that private practice medicine, the work of the GPs and specialists, is like oxygen.
I love that. It's completely invisible when it's there. You don't even think about it as you go about your day.
But the exact second it's gone, you start suffocating.
Right. The ER doctor is the firefighter.
Yeah.
We absolutely need them, and they are the undisputed heroes of this spectacular, terrifying moment.
You want them there when the house is burning down.
But the GPs, the specialized surgeons, the internal medicine doctors, they are the architects.
They are the ones who design, build, and meticulously maintain the house so that you can actually live in it safely for your entire life.
It's a less noisy truth. It doesn't make for an exciting primetime television drama.
But it is the quiet truth that holds the entire country upright.
You know, taking a step back from healthcare for a second, this dynamic raises a really important question that applies to almost every facet of our society.
Oh, totally.
If our public policies, our national funding, and our collective empathy are being dictated entirely by what looks the most dramatic on a television screen, what other massive invisible crises are we completely ignoring simply because they don't make for a good photograph?
Oh, that is such a good point. Think about the teachers quietly holding our education systems together without resources, or the engineers doing the slow, invisible work of maintaining the crumbling physical infrastructure beneath our cities.
Right. The vital work of maintenance never gets the microphone until the bridge actually collapses.
Exactly. So next time you are watching the evening news and you see that frantic footage of an emergency room, the stretchers, the flashing sirens, remember the illusion of the front door.
Yeah. Take a moment to look past the noise.
Look past the neon lights and think about the architects working in silence upstairs and out in your community. Because while the firefighters might be the ones to save your life tonight, it's the architects who ensure you have a healthy life to wake up to tomorrow. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.